Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you tonight. A new show debuted on the WWE Network, which was called Legends, with JBL. This was episode 1. It was an in-depth interview with Eric Bischoff. And honestly, I will tell you, when I first fired up the WWE Network and I pressed on the little thumbnail to make the video start playing, and I looked down and I noticed that this was a 50-minute episode, my stomach turned a little bit. But I will tell you honestly that words cannot describe how great this show is. I mean, I've read Eric Bischoff's book. I've read Eric Bischoff's Wikipedia page. I've listened to Eric Bischoff on the Stone Cold Steve Austin podcast more than a few times. And I think he's even been a guest on the Chris Jericho podcast, even though I'm not 100% sure of that one. But I've heard the Eric Bischoff story, a lot. I mean, I watched all the episodes of the Monday Night War series. I've seen the 2002 interview with Eric Bischoff in front of the Monday Night Raw set that you see on all of the WWE documentaries over the years. I've seen just about everything, but I will tell you what puts this over the top is JBL. JBL is an excellent host. I think, honestly, you fire up this on the WWE Network out of the on-demand section. You listened to his, 30 to 45 second promo talking about the show and introducing Eric Bischoff. You will see how good of a host JBL is, and see that the character that he portrays on Monday Night Raw on the announce team just does not give any credit to JBL. I know that JBL has done real television work for Fox News, being the sort of money and stockbroker kind of talk guy. So he is a real professional television host, but I honestly can say that I was really surprised. I got a tweet from somebody today talking about my preview video for the JBL show. When I talked about the fact that JBL hadn't done any podcasts, they were able to tell me that JBL was a guest on the Chris Jericho podcast. I think there was a while when I didn't notice that I wasn't subscribed to the Chris Jericho podcast, but I'm able now to go back into the on-demand section of the Jericho podcast and pull that one up. I can guarantee you that that's going to be a really good one. This was a great show. Like I said, I mean, if you've read Bischoff's book, if you've read, Bischoff's Wikipedia page, if you know anything about Eric Bischoff, you know his story. But the conversation that JBL has with Eric Bischoff was great. It's a lot along the likes of like a podcast would be, but it's sort of like with a 3 to 4 camera setup, with them bouncing all around. I'm guessing that more than likely they're filming Eric Bischoff sort of straight on without JBL in there, and I'm guessing that they're feeding him some questions that they can cut out and put into documentaries somewhere along the way, whether if they have more WCW docs or they talk about certain wrestlers or certain things that pop up, or even use this on like WWE Countdown or on the list. Just getting a quick clip and able to put it in there. The WWE will be able to use this interview 1,000 different ways and only have to pay Bischoff the one-time fee to make this guy come in here. Very smart on their part. But Bischoff talks about basically, growing up, being a wrestling fan, bouncing around from job to job, and then, realizing that when he got married and he was expecting his first child, that he needed to get a real job. He talked about the fact that he was in a wrestling tournament and he was trying to sell to Vern Gagne, the AWA, sort of a way to publicize it and get more tickets sold for the event. Vern Gagne learned who he was. Then, this is something that I did not know, and if I knew, I had forgotten. But very early in his life, Eric Bischoff and Sonny Ono, yes, Sonny Ono of WCW managerial fame, went into business with each other as being friends. They bought and produced and sold a Ninja Star Wars game where basically, Sonny Ono talked about growing up in Tokyo, talking about getting Coke bottle caps and throwing them at friends, playing tag with each other. Eric Bischoff talked about living in Detroit, and they would play Army, where their version of tag was basically throwing rocks at each other. And they basically, made this game where they would make and produce these ninja stars that they sold, and the kids would buy them, and they would fling them at each other all around the house, and they would be tons of fun. So they made this game. They were able to, I think they said they produced it in Korea, and they shipped him over all these games to sell. And Bischoff at this point didn't really know what he was going to do, but he went back to Vern Gagne and the AWA. They set up sort of a business relationship between the two, where it would be like a 50-50 split. They would use Vern Gagne's AWA television in order to sell these games with an 800 number, and Bischoff would be able to sell his game. Vern Gagne would be able to collect 50% of the profits, and all he would have to do is give up the commercial time for people to sell this. Through this, basically, Bischoff was brought into the AWA in the sales department, and basically when an announcer quit one day or was fired, he was the one guy that was standing there that was wearing a suit, so they plugged him onto television to do the one day that they needed. And then basically they kept on bringing in announcers and firing the announcers to the point where they said, it's going to be a lot cheaper and probably take up a lot less time if we just teach Bischoff how to do this. And he ended up becoming an announcer himself. They bring up the fact that he went and, I guess you can say auditioned, tried out in front of Vince McMahon to be a WWF announcer once the AWA was pretty much on its way down. He ended up not getting the job. One thing leads to another. He ends up down in WCW as sort of like the last ranked announcer. He was the announcer of like the backstage announcer on pay-per-views, and he would be like the lead announcer on like the D or the E show way down on the bottom, just sort of getting a role in there. And then basically WCW got to the point where they were tired of losing money, and they were looking for anything fresh and anything new, and Eric Bischoff threw his name into the hat, where basically they took him and they made him president of the company. And you would think of like, when Jim Ross would leave WCW and go to WWE, how much power he would get, basically being the guy that's in charge of what's the title that Johnny Ace or Jim Ross had? They're the talent relations, I guess you can say. And the fact that he wouldn't get this job, I guess what WCW was looking for was just somebody that was not a wrestling person, not a guy in the wrestling business. Bischoff was enough removed that they ended up giving him the job. They'd say that Jim Ross was very jealous. He was thinking that he was going to live up to the reputation of the guy that sort of made him in Jim Herd. And there was a lot of heat between Bischoff and Jim Ross about the fact that he didn't get this job. One thing leads to another. There's debates whether if Eric Bischoff fired Jim Ross or if Jim Ross quit. Basically, Eric Bischoff sort of pats himself on the back, saying that the people inside WCW wanted to move Jim Ross to sales, and at that point he knew that Jim Ross was not going to be happy in the sales department, and he was just going to drive a lot of people crazy. And he basically told Jim, if you have another offer, if there's something else you'd like to do, you're more than free to go and take the offer. He does not take that as him firing Jim Ross. It sort of is saying if there's an opportunity out there, go take it, because we don't really need you here, is the way that he sort of put it. So it's patting himself on the back, not say that he did it, but within getting that job, he found ways of costing a lot of money. Basically, one of the things that he was looked at as a guy that was crazy was he partnered up with Disney in order to use the Disney parks in order to shoot the WCW shows. Basically, they would go out touring, whether if it was for television, whether if it was for a pay-per-view, and they would end up having to paper the crowds. A lot of towns, they would only be able to sell 200 to 300 tickets, and they'd be losing a lot of money. And for years, WCW would say, like, hey, every time we leave to go out on tour, we lose money, so we're going to go do more touring. And Bischoff basically said that does not make sense. We'll go here, we'll use the Disney park, we'll be able to use fresh people that are walking around the Disney parks that want to see a live television show being filmed. They don't care if it's a wrestling show. All they basically want to do is see something being filmed that might be on television and be able to go and do that. And he said the wrestlers really didn't like it because, it took away their touring dates and, things like that. But within a year, Eric Bischoff turned around WCW to the point where it was making $40 million, where it lost $10 million the previous year before. JBL, being a real money guy, was asking questions if anybody in the Turner company thought of like, hey, that's a pretty big deal for anybody in business to be able to do that. It doesn't matter if you're in the wrestling business or if you're selling T-shirts or anything you're doing. Being able to turn around a business like that, you got to be thinking that this person has big ideas. Why did they never think of putting you into another job instead of another company? Where Bischoff talks about the fact that he just wasn't a corporate guy. He was a guy more that wore T-shirt and jeans, cowboy boots, didn't like to shave. He rode his Harley to work, and people inside of Turner wanted to act as if WCW and the wrestling business never really happened. This was the first part of the interview. They talk about the rise of WCW. The second part is going to be a lot about the fall of WCW, talking about him going and working for WWE. And on the trailer at the very end, they ask him like, do you want another shot? Do you want to get back into the wrestling business? I really want to hear that answer. I know that I'm going to listen to part 2. Main reason I make this video is trying to get people fired up to go watch the video themselves on the WWE Network. But it was a really good one, and I'm really sitting here wondering what's going to happen, because with the problems going on in TNA, I don't think that Dixie Carter would go back to Eric Bischoff. I don't even think Eric Bischoff would go back to TNA. But I don't really know where else he could go. I don't think Vince, Triple H, is going to put him in any sort of power, but I would love to see if he would want that power back.